Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday. You know about this, right? Last week, we had a birthday, kids. Last week for you, me, and the JHP. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We are going to talk about a profound new song by The National featuring Phoebe Bridgers. That is going to lead us into a discussion of some mental health stuff and the power that music has to help and how important it is for us to have these conversations, okay? It's going to be a good one, not exactly a fun one, but I think an important one, and we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Hey, have you smashed the like button on this one? Did you smash a like on this one? That's what the cool YouTubers say. Especially in the football world, you'll get a lot of this, Smash a like on it. Smash a like on this one. Hey, before you go, smash a like on this. That's kind of a little bit Australian. Some Australian is beginning to bleed into my various accents because I've been watching Wellmania. Wellmania on Netflix is a vehicle for she's a comedian, but also a huge Instagram superstar, Celeste Barber, who does really, really funny little short reels where she will mimic and lightly make fun of some of the more blatant sexual stuff that Insta models do. These really self-indulgent, vaguely pornographic, erotic kinds of, hey, look at me, attention-seeking behavior that Instagram models do. And then Celeste Barber, who has what we might describe as a more typical body, let's say. She'll put on, this sort of matching outfits and try to do the weird, exotic posing and whatever. It's really, really funny stuff. And, she is celebrated and applauded by women everywhere and men everywhere, and whatever your gender identification might be, who feel as though it's nice to see somebody representing reality as opposed to this unreality that you get with a lot of these models. Anyways, Celeste Barber is also a comedian. She has a special out on Netflix at this moment, but she also has this series called Wellmania about this Australian woman who's trying to sort it out. And to be perfectly honest, she's a character that is really, really difficult to cheer for. Utterly self-obsessed, utterly selfish, utterly self-important, really, really difficult to root for, and you gotta kind of hang with it. And I'm not even sure yet, after like 7 episodes, that I can get behind this girl, but we're in, and it doesn't matter except to say that she is Australian. This series is set in Australia, and so there's some Australian beginning to leak into my various accents. And I don't do Australian well, all right? This has been well established that I do not do an Australian accent very well. So, when I say, smash a like on that sounds very Australian to me. And that's just a way of getting us in. Did you smash a like? If you smash as many likes as YouTubers ask you to smash, you're going to break a lot of like buttons. That's all I'm saying about that, This is something of an auspicious occasion. All right. Actually, the auspicious occasion was last week, but we couldn't get to it because I had a guest on the program last week. Last week, April 12th of 2023, marked the exact 4-year birthday/anniversary of the John Huff Podcast. Insert crowd cheering sound effect here. It was 4 years ago last week that I published the first episode. It was April 12th of the year of our Lord, 2019, when I published the episode with Phoenix Fire, and I feel a certain self-imposed pressure to have something really profound and insightful to say about that. I don't. Except to say, here we have again the evidence that, small efforts over time, small accumulations over time add up to a body of work. If you are a writer and you are setting out to write a book, that can be an overwhelming prospect. You look at the whole field from one vantage point and you think there's just no freaking way I'm going to get 300 pages. That is too much. But if you take it page at a time, day at a time, you write a page a day, inside 1 year, you've got yourself a first draft, man. That time is going to pass either way. The question is whether you will contribute that one daily page. And if you do, all of a sudden, you don't focus on the whole thing. You focus on one little slice at a time. And this work accumulates over time. And then all of a sudden you look back and you have your book. Or in my case, you have your 139 episodes of a freaking podcast. And I have not thought deeply about how I might mark an anniversary of this show. In fact, it usually happens that the anniversary comes around, and then 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh, wait, we had an anniversary. Yay, us. It was 4 years ago. Now it becomes timely. All right. You look at the trajectory of the show, and I know some of you have been here since moment one. Some of you smashed a like on Phoenix Fire 4 years ago and remain with me today, and I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you whether this is your 139th or your first episode. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you taking a chance on an independent podcaster in a world full of podcasters whose names you recognize from Hollywood films, etc. Celebrity podcasts became a real freaking thing. They've always been a thing, but a real freaking thing during the pandemic. And that turned the podcasting world a little bit on its ear, and it becomes just that much harder for an indie podcaster, much like an indie songwriter, musician, whatever, a self-publishing author, to find any traction and to find an audience. So if you're taking a chance, I appreciate you doing that. And if you hung with me since moment one, I really appreciate that too. This is relevant because we're not exactly at a crossroads, but we're at another one of those points along the road where you stop and you just take a look at it all. This happens in writing a book. I've done several of those, unpublished, but you stop at certain points and you take a look at where you've been and you take a look at where you're at and you try to get a vibe for where you're going. Depending on how you do this, what your process is, right? We're at one now, not a crossroads, just a moment where you take stock that has nothing to do with an anniversary and everything to do with the episode that I published last week, all right? Now, on the actual 4th anniversary, I published last week's episode, which was a conversation with the great J-Bo Billman of Grindr Blues, among others. And the reason that's profound, the reason that matters, the reason we're talking about it now, especially in reference to 4 years ago, is this eternal question of, is this a guest podcast or is this a solo podcast? Now, if you've been around since the beginning, the first roughly a year, 9 months of the show were interviews, except I call them conversations. I don't like the word interviews. The first batch of episodes, 30, 40, whatever, were conversations. And when I came into this podcast, that was the initial vision, the original intent. I started off doing conversations because I've always done conversations. As a music blogger, it was interviews. As a podcaster, it just seemed natural to me to continue doing that. And then I modeled the show roughly on Mark Maron's podcast. a little bit on Rogan's podcast, and those are all conversational shows. And I have not really thought much beyond that. It seemed the logical, natural thing for me to do. Right from the very beginning, it was, we'll have guests, we'll talk about whatever. The intent was to inspire, so it was to bring on people who are doing unconventional things and making it work, because at the time, I needed that evidence. You know, I was a working musician, trying real hard to be a full-timer and to make a living. I had done a little bit of touring. Things had begun to blossom just a little bit. And I needed that push. I needed the evidence myself, and I think the people who listened to my show wanted the evidence that it was possible to do things. And so I had people on like Phoenix Fire, who has Guinness World Records for letting people staple him. You know what I mean? And that was the original thing. And then over time, I realized, a couple things. A, it can be really, really tough to get guests nailed down and to book them. There's a lot of extra work that goes into that. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into some of my solo episodes too, in terms of research, etc. But the actual nuts and bolts practicality of nailing down guests, getting them scheduled, getting them to actually show up, getting them to respond to you, getting them to say yes. I had a lot of success with that, but it became difficult to do at certain points, and it became a struggle. And then I realized, I modeled my show after Maron, and I modeled my show after Rogan, etc. I don't actually listen to those podcasts. I listen to Maron once in a while, if there's a guest in particular who interests me. But for the most part, if I listen to Mark Maron, I listen to his preamble, which is usually, 15 minutes or something of just Maron talking. I listen to that. And then I don't listen to the interview. I listen to that, right? Or Lewis Black's Rantcast. I will listen to Lewis doing his 20-minute preamble about whatever the topics of the day are. And then usually when they switch over to the rants that are submitted during his shows by the audience, and he reads those, I check out. I listen to Lewis talk, and then when he does the rest of the podcast, I check out. Ditto Maron, and the podcasts that I listen to are solo podcasts. They are Blind Boy. They are Monty's Rockcast. They are Jim Fortin. I do not listen to a lot of interview podcasts. And I'm like, I modeled my show after stuff that I don't really listen to. And so there came a point where I took a shot at doing a solo episode, and I really liked that. And then that felt really natural to me. And then as time has gone by, the show has largely become that, solo episodes. But then you get an episode like the Jabo episode last week, and I get all of this really positive feedback. Like several people, either face-to-face or via the socials, whatever, have reached out to me to say, really, really enjoyed that episode. And I've had lots of people in the past say to me that the strength of this program and the potential, the highest potential of this program, lies not in my solo episodes, though you may enjoy them, but in the conversations. The scuttlebutt seems to be that I have a good and a natural interviewing style, which is the product of having done thousands of interviews with people, over time. And that the real value in the program comes through the conversations, not necessarily the solo episodes. And that leaves me, again, wondering what the right way to proceed is. Right? Because I do these solo episodes and they have what audience they have. And I think to myself, am I just doing that to hear myself talk? Is the real value in the conversations? And this is where you, the listeners of the John Huff podcast, come into the equation. Because I like doing the solo episodes, but I don't know if they're doing much for you. And, I like doing a lot of the conversations too. It's very cool to spend an hour with somebody like Jabo Billman, or with, any of the other people that I have been fortunate enough to connect with and have on the program. I am resistant to that because I feel as though there are so many interview podcasts already. And when I go out there in the world and I scope out, podcasting best practices or tips and tricks on growing your audience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which I do regularly because I am trying to make the show as good as it can be. And there's an assumption in a lot of those best practices that you have guests, right? Like that is what a podcast is, a person with guests. And that rankles me. It irritates me for some reason because my favorite podcasts are not that. And it seems like all of the podcasts are guest shows. And I'm resistant to that because how am I going to compete with Marin or Rogan or these people who get on kind of the highest profile guests? How am I competing with that? And should I be? And is it extreme wankery to be even talking about this right now? All of it to say, what do you want from me, listeners of the JHP? Are you more drawn to the conversational episodes with guests? Are you more drawn to the solo episodes that I do? Do you care either way? Are you just pleased to enjoy the program? I really want to know because I want the show to reach its fullest potential, whatever that may be. And I want it to serve you in the way that works for you. I want to do this in the way that makes it as good as it can be and as helpful and useful as it can be. And so we sit here on the 4th anniversary, and I find it curious and ironic that the actual episode of the 4th anniversary, after so many solo episodes, was a conversation. And then I get really nice feedback on that I don't typically get on my solo episodes, and it makes you stop and think, well, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I had it right in the beginning, and that is up to you, I think, at least in part, to decide. So I am not asking you to smash the like button. I am asking you to smash the message button or to respond to wherever I post this episode online and say, hey, man, more conversations, please. Or keep going with the solo episodes, please. Or keep doing a mix of both and it's all good. I would like your feedback here on the 4th anniversary of the program about what you enjoy and what you would like more of and where you think the real momentum and energy in this program are. In any case, whether you like the solos, whether you like the conversations, whether you don't really care either way, I want to thank you again for being here. And I want to thank you for supporting the program these 4 years and now 139 published episodes. It's been an interesting ride, and I should do more reflecting on it so as to present that here to you. I'm not going to, but I should. It's been really interesting. I think back to sitting down with Phoenix Fire in a coffee shop for that first interview, that first conversation, and then by the skin of my teeth getting to sit down on episode, I think it was 4, with Jason Tate, arguably my favorite drummer and most influential drummer on me. It's just really cool, when you do this sort of thing, you find yourself in just really cool and interesting situations, and you find yourself, when I talk about good things happen when you put yourself out there, this is what I'm talking about. I put myself out there and suddenly I find myself in conversation with Jason Tate, or with Emily Dolan Davis, or with Sarah Tomek, or with any number of people who I've met along the way who have been on the show. And I think it's just really cool. When you have a platform, even if it's a modest platform like this one, it is a key, it opens doors to at least hanging out with really, really freaking cool people. My original tagline was conversations with cool people. And I had a lot of cool conversations with cool people. And I changed that tagline partly because I shifted to more of a solo focus, and also because people gave me stick about it. People who wanted to be on the show be like, what, I'm not a cool person? It's like, dude, that's not what I'm saying. It's weird. Sometimes you step on landmines, that you didn't see, which is the point of landmines. In any case, it's been an interesting ride. I've had a good time doing it for the most part. I know we took a couple of hiatus. It can be really tough. It can be really tough to pour your heart and soul into a thing and have it kind of not really catch on. That's the life of any creative, really, Any band will have that happen. It's like, we poured our guts into this album that we made and nobody cares. Or there's a pandemic that squashes your ability to play the record. Like stuff happens that is discouraging along the way. I've had at times to take steps back from that. And, we've come back around and we're going strong and it's been good. And I appreciate you listening. That's all I'm saying. 4 years. I appreciate you listening. Please let me know what you would like to hear more of. Now let's get to some music. There's been a lot of music. The YouTube algorithm is finally catching on that I like to hear new music. And I sample a lot of new music these days, particularly on the YouTube. There's just always something coming up, Something new to check out, something new to listen to. And I'll be perfectly honest, most of it doesn't do a lot for me. It's just, okay, I like that, or I like that. Or there's been a couple of songs lately that came along and they had like just banging riffs. Really like this, or like, this is going to be good. And then the rest of the song didn't quite fulfill it. It's not me being picky. It's just, I hear a lot of new stuff. It's rare for something to really get me. And it's just such as life, man. There's a lot of music out there. There's a lot of rock music out there. They keep saying rock is dead. It's very demonstrably not dead. There's a lot of rock music happening, and it's being finally shuttled into my YouTube feed, and I'm checking a lot of it out. And so you come across something like Burning Witches from a few weeks ago. Really freaking fabulous. And there's a lot of heavy stuff happening. Metal is alive and well. There's this throwback kind of thrash sound that is happening that's really freaking cool. So it's out there, man. You just have to be able to go and find it. But we're not talking metal this week, with one possible exception. There's a new tune out that's really making waves, and it is by The National featuring Phoebe Bridgers, all right? That song is called Your Mind Is Not Your Friend. Have you seen this one yet? The National is one of those bands, like the War on Drugs, that has an enormous following and plays like headlines, huge festivals all over the world. And nobody quite knows how or why that happened. Not suggesting these are not good bands. As you know, the War on Drugs is arguably my favorite band now. Most certainly one of them, all right? King's X remains the traditional favorite. The War on Drugs has captivated me for several years now. And as we said on an earlier episode, their show that I saw in Toronto last summer is maybe the greatest concert I've ever seen in my freaking life. I love the War on Drugs. What I'm saying is that they don't have radio hits, all right? And somehow they have this massive, like, people hear them. Somehow, somewhere along the way, people hear the War on Drugs, and they have amassed this incredible following. Well, The National is the same. The National is arguably bigger, all right? They've been around since the year, 20 years now. Dropped several records, Grammy nominations, I think a Grammy win somewhere along the way. I've not gotten deeply into The National because it just hasn't happened. But what I've listened to, I've really enjoyed. And in particular, their drummer, Brian Devendorf, is freaking fabulous, all right? Brian Devendorf is one of these cats who plays really interesting parts. If you were a connoisseur of drumming by a guy who just hears things a little bit differently, executes things flawlessly that are just a little bit different, really interesting stuff. I love Charlie Hall from the War on Drugs for his sheer power and simplicity, because that's what I aspire to as a player, because that seems to be my wheelhouse. Brian Devendorf can do that too, but he also, and maybe the National's music makes more room for this, plays really interesting, intricate stuff at times. Really creative, and I dig that about him. Fabulous drummer, and I intend to dig more deeply into his playing, all right? I have not listened deeply to The National, but I have listened to a lot of The National, and when they release new stuff, as they are right now, in anticipation of a new record that's coming out, I usually check it out, and I like it, or I am okay with it, whatever. This new song, Your Mind Is Not Your Friend, with Phoebe Bridgers, is, what I've got written down is, it's an important song. And I think it is an important song for a couple of reasons. From a sheer visibility, career perspective, I think it's going to be an important song for the National. I think it will expose the National to a lot of people who have not heard the National before, particularly those who are fans of Phoebe Bridgers, and there are many, and they are young. So it's a good move for the National to have Phoebe on board. But this song is all about mental health, okay? And we know that mental health is increasingly a visible topic, is increasingly a topic that is being talked about. And that is a good freaking thing, okay? So this is another song, this is another piece of art that invokes and inspires conversations about mental health. Now, this is the, as of yet, not quite observed legacy of the pandemic. We got past, more or less, the physical stuff. The mental stuff is, I think, going to be the fallout. We're beginning to see some of that. I think we will see more of that. And so these conversations that make it okay to talk about mental health, to sing about mental health, to encourage people to seek help for mental health, and to encourage health systems to make that help available. This is all very important. So I think philosophically, topically, this is an important song. And I got to tell you straight up, kids, it affected me. All right? I have not been shy about my own struggles with anxiety, particularly since the pandemic. I have dealt with dark and low thoughts. I have dealt with low moods. I have dealt with depressions in the past, kids. I have not been shy about that, and I will not be shy about that. And anxiety has been a huge problem and remains a problem for me. I'm doing a lot better with it. Help from therapy, help from self-reflection, spirituality, meditation, all that stuff. I ain't no expert, but I know what's been working for me. This song really affected me, okay? And it's just a heavy tune. Not heavy in the musical sense, heavy in the visceral, experiential sense, all right? A lot of piano. It's like a slow, brooding, kind of 6/8 song. Some strings happening. You know what I mean? It is not a happy song, but it is an evocative song. It is a sad song. And by that reckoning, it is a heavy song. And the lyrics really get to the heart of the matter. I mean, there's some stuff in the lyrics that choked me up a little bit. First verse, your imagination is in an awful place. Don't believe in manifestation. Your heart will break. And yeah, your imagination is in an awful place. I've talked about this, and I don't want to make this too heavy. This is, after all, a birthday party. But in the deepest throes of anxiety, your imagination does become an awful place. I've said before that my reckoning is anxiety convinces you that your worst fears are either happening or are imminent. And your body is in this intense, adrenalized fight or flight while there's no threat. There's nothing happening. It is all imagination. It's all happening in your mind, but it is so convincing and it is so real, man. Don't believe in manifestation, your heart will break. I'm not sure exactly what the songwriter is, Matt Berninger. He's fabulous. He's the voice of the National. The song was written when he himself was going through a period of writer's block. He was going through a period of depression. He was struggling a little bit, and so he wrote about that. And it's interesting, I read an interview with him where he talked about how his wife said to him throughout this process, "This is not really you. This is not really you, Matt." These thoughts he was having, this perspective, this view on the world, this is not really you. And that's exactly freaking right, man. That is so insightful. You know, I had the sense during the worst of my anxiety, I had the sense that I was not in control of my mind anymore. This other entity, this other energy was in control. It was not me. It was not really me in control. And then when that fever kind of broke, I had this profound sense of being in control of my own mind again, being in control of my own thoughts. That's how it works. It's like this entity possesses you that is not you. And it can become this weird thought spiral. There's a couple of different ways to approach this. There is a school of thought that says, in fact, your mind is designed to solve problems, right? Your mind requires certainty and explanations of things. And so you have this feeling in you of fight or flight or fear or anxiety or depression. And the feeling comes first. And then your mind needs to rationalize that. So I'm sitting there in my backyard shaking with this sense of absolute dread as the pandemic is happening. And then my mind says, there's a huge siren going off here. Better explain why. And so it comes up with all the scenarios that would justify that feeling inside. And then they just begin to spiral. This could happen, that could happen, the other thing could happen, the whole world could collapse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's so convincing. And then that feeling, they justify each other. And you're just on the ride at that point, man. You are on a roller coaster. So there's this feeling that your mind is trying to explain the feelings. And then the feelings get more intense because your mind's coming up with all sorts of good reasons why you ought to have those feelings. And then they just spin. And I felt that too. And it's out of your control. If you have ever felt, if you're watching, let's say, a thriller film and some jumpy thing happens, some spook thing, a door slams or whatever, something jumps out at you, and you feel that adrenaline go through you. That can be fun for 2 seconds. Not so fun for 2 straight months. You know what I mean? It's like the back spasms that mercifully I've finally begun to get over. It's like people say, what's that like? Well, okay, here's what you do. Flex your bicep, right? Like you're Arnold freaking Schwarzenegger. Flex that bicep and then keep it flexed for 2 solid months. See how that feels. See how exhausting that is. Anxiety is very much the same way. You sit there in this intense fight or flight for months, maybe years on end, man. It is exhausting. It erodes you. And your imagination, as the song says, is in an awful place. Don't believe in manifestation. This thoughts become things idea, which is out there in the spiritual community. Manifestation, the secret, what you focus on with an emotional intensity, you tend to attract into your life. It's like, it's a warning. Don't believe in that right now. Don't believe in that right now, because what you're imagining in your mind will come in and it will break your heart. It will blow you away. It will explode you if you manifest the stuff that's in your brain right now. And it comes to the chorus. Don't you understand? Your mind is not your friend again. It takes you by the hand and leaves you nowhere. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about the experiences that I've had, and it's resonating so hard with me. I got emotional about it. What I find really powerful is the line, your mind is not your friend again. That's really interesting. It's like we've been through this before. This is chronic. You're doing it again. It's happening again. But there's a slight glimmer of light around that. It's like we've survived it. We've survived it before. Our mind is not our friend again. We've been through this. Remember, you can step away from this. It takes you by the hand and leaves you nowhere. Second verse, you feel it in your nerves. It's choking out the sun. You try in vain to be persuaded that it's nothing. You cannot rationalize this. You try in vain to be persuaded that it's nothing. You've heard this, depressed people. Just get over it. Come on, man. Just buck up. It does not work that way. You are not in control of your mind and emotions. You try in vain to be persuaded that it's nothing. You try that rationalization, but it does not work. The thoughts persist. The racing mind persists. The heart palpitations may persist. You can't really think your way out of that. Second chorus is a double chorus. Don't you understand your mind is not your friend again? It takes you by the hand and leaves you nowhere. You are like a child. You're going to flip your lid again. Don't you understand your mind is not your friend? It hits me so hard. You know, it's like your mind is not being friendly to you. It is not being benevolent to you. When you are in the throes of a depression, when you are in the throes of an anxiety, your mind is not your friend. Your mind is not working with you. Not really, you know. It is not patting you on the head. It is not holding you close to say it's going to be okay. Your mind is a firecracker going off, you know. Your mind is a bomb getting ready to explode, but I guess it's dealing with its own stuff, trying to understand these feelings that are happening, you know. Tranquilize the oceans between the poles. You're crawling under rocks and climbing into holes. It's like this hiding from the world, hiding from the feelings, hiding from everything. And this takes people over, okay? This takes people over. This fear, this hopelessness, this sense that you should be able to control this. You know, it's nothing. You should be able to persuade yourself or be persuaded that it's nothing, but it does not work that way because you are not seeing real reality. I have talked about this before, real reality versus perceived reality. And if your perceived reality, so convincing from your emotions, so convincing from your brain, the perceived reality is fear and hopelessness, and your worst fears being imminent, then you cannot rationalize your way out of that. You just can't do it. You want to crawl under rocks. You want to climb into holes. This takes people over the edge, man. It's a pervasive and an awful, awful thing. It's an illness. And over time, it becomes habit. You know, you can convince yourself utterly that your perception is the reality, even if it isn't. And that's a dark, dark, dark place to be. And that's your mind not being your friend, man. And I'm listening to this song. It's a dark song. It's a haunting song. It's a chilling song. You know, it's really visceral. It's really evocative. But you know, it can be cathartic too if the music has that ability to pull the emotion out of you. That's incredibly helpful because the thing is, these things need to be expressed. These emotions need to be released. I've talked about the Anxiety RX podcast and this notion that this anxiety inside you, this depression inside you is in fact an actual energy that is left over usually from a childhood experience that was not properly processed. It is a physical thing that gets stuck in your body. This needs to be released. It needs to be moved. Music has an interesting and unique power in some cases to do that. This song is sad. And the video is weird because it's Matt Berninger and his brother, and they're on a playground and they're playing on the play toys. And it seems to be this weirdly happy, cathartic thing. And then Phoebe Bridgers is playing like a mom with a baby. But it's sort of, I'm not sure how to describe it really. It's like it's not real or something. Like there's slow motion and it's like a hallucination almost, or a fantasy. Can't really explicate the video at this point. But if the music moves you and can help lift, you know, crying can be very helpful as an emotional release. Catharsis can be really helpful as an emotional release. And so I think this song is important because A, it opens up these conversations and it helps people who struggle with mental health issues to recognize that they are not alone and that it's possible to overcome that. And it's okay to express that. And it's okay to feel things. You know, one of the things about a thought spiral is that pulling yourself up into your head can help take you out of your emotions. We spiral in our thoughts so as not to feel things because the feelings are the awful part. The feeling of fear is terrible. It's exhausting. It's ill. It's a sickness, man. It is a sick feeling. And so a lot of people go into thought spirals so as to avoid those feelings. The feelings need to be felt. The feelings need to be embraced. The feelings need to be allowed in. And in a lot of cases, they will dissipate. And in some cases, music can help with the dissipating, you know? Avoiding these feelings, it's a no-win situation because they're everywhere you go, because they're in you, man. It's really, really rough. Mental health and those who struggle with it, it can be just extraordinarily rough. And this song expresses that really, really well. And I think the video expresses it really, really well too. I just haven't got a great explanation of the video. But I think you ought to check it out, all right? I think if you can separate it from the meaning, just take it on its own merit as a song. It's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song by a band that, despite its huge following, probably doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And if you have not listened to The National, you should. Now I'm going to dig into them more. They have a new record coming out, and this is one of the songs on it. They've released 2 or 3 singles from the album, and these guys just write really musically profound, lyrically profound. The music is lush. It is beautiful. It's kind of indie / art rock. If you are into the war on drugs, you're probably already listening to The National, but if you're not, check them out and listen to this song. It's poignant, it's profound, and it opens up a really important conversation. If you do not understand mental health, if you're one of the lucky ones who have not struggled with depression or with anxiety, and I think that is a very rare thing indeed, and you want to kind of understand it, think about these lyrics, listen to the way they are presented. And if you're a person like me who has struggled with some of this stuff, you may recognize it, and it may be helpful to you to know that other people feel that way too. It's normal. It's not a defect. There's not something wrong with you, but there may be something that needs to be not confronted, but accepted. Something may need to be allowed, and you may need to investigate. You may need to just sit with some of those dark feelings and try to understand what they are, where they come from, and what they want from you. Maybe they can be released in a piece of art. A lot of this is just energy that needs to be moved. And I'm not qualified to talk about that, but this is my own experience of it. And this song is really evocative for that reason. So go listen, go watch the video for Your Mind Is Not Your Friend by The National featuring Phoebe Bridgers, all right? And now, for your listening pleasure, it's time for the Patreon plug. Very quickly, yes, I am trying to support this podcast via Patreon, all right? The traditional route is to have sponsorships and have ad reads and to fill your whole dang podcast. Like there's podcasts I listen to now where, I kid you not, you turn the thing on and it's 5 minutes of ad reads. And then halfway through, 5 more minutes of freaking ad reads. Stop that. I find that so frustrating and irritating, and so I don't want to do it here. And that's one of the reasons that I've chosen Patreon as the method and model for monetizing the show. All right, patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. The other thing I like about Patreon is that it is voluntary. You can do it, you cannot do it. But if you do it, if you sign up for my one membership tier, which is $5 a month, the price of, a cup of coffee, whatever, $5 a month, what you are saying to me is, dude, I appreciate the content you produce. I appreciate the messages. I appreciate the effort you put into this. I know it takes time. I know it takes a ton of effort to do this. I appreciate it. I value it. I want to support you. And I'm going to do this for $5 a month via Patreon. It is a voluntary thing. If you don't want to do that, if you can't do that, and some people can't, and that's cool, man, the podcast will remain free and accessible where you enjoy fine podcasts, okay? This is you volunteering to say, I want to help you because I appreciate and I value what you do. And if you do find some value in this program, entertainment, information, education, you get tipped off to some new music, you find in my voice something friendly and compelling to listen to once a week, please consider supporting via Patreon, patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. If you don't want to do that, that's cool. You can support by sharing these episodes. Tell your friends. Despite all of your boosting Facebook posts and whatever, the best word of mouth is still the best advertising, all right? So tell people. You have friends who listen to podcasts. Tip them off to the show, please, or share them on your socials. You can follow me, Facebook at John Huff Podcast, Instagram John Huff Podcast, TikTok John Huff Podcast. Please, if you are not following on those platforms, do so. I put stuff on there that's hopefully interesting for you, stuff related to music, stuff related to whatever. This week on Facebook, on the weekend, I posted up an 8-minute video of Henry Rollins talking about his trajectory and how he got one shot and he took it. He's looking at a very difficult, low-income life until Black Flag came along and offered him the singer position. And he had a choice, man. I can stay here managing Haagen-Dazs, or I can throw caution to the wind and chase this dream. And he chased it. And he talks about how grateful he is for that and how much he remembers that he can go back to where he was, if he does not honor this chance that he's got. So I post that kind of stuff on my various socials, It's not just plugs or ads for these episodes. There's actually content there that I hope is edifying. So if you're not following me on Instagram, Facebook, etc., please consider doing so. And please share these episodes and, ratings and reviews help. The easiest thing you can do to help, a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, preferably a positive one. And I thank you for all of that. There was more music I was going to talk about this week, but I got off onto, little highways I was not expecting to go to. Very, very quickly, check out the new song by Greta Van Fleet. I've never been a big fan of Greta Van Fleet. I know that they, for the last 10 years, have been, by some estimations, carrying the torch for 70s rock and roll. And then the other side of that is they're just a Led Zeppelin clone. I don't know if that's true or not, but they have a new single out. They got a new record coming, imminently. And they have a new song called Meeting the Master. And you ought to listen to that. Okay? If you've never been a Greta Van Fleet person, because they're cool, man, and I don't do that, or they're popular, check that out. This is a very cool song. It's in line with the national tune, all right? It is an acoustic, mostly acoustic ballad, but some strings come in. It becomes very epic. Reminded me, and this is no bad thing, of a Triumph song. Oh yeah, kids, it's not just Zeppelin. I got flavors of Triumph out of this, and that is freaking great because I love me some Triumph, man. Fight the good fight. And the voice on this cat, Josh Kiska, holy cats, man. There are two Geddy Lee voices happening in the world these days. That is this guy, Josh Kiska from Greta Van Fleet, and the singer from Crown Lands, all right? Cody Bowles, who has just this insane, both of them can sing so high, with this power. Very Geddy Lee, and we know that Crown Lands are huge, huge Rush fans, and so I think that's where Cody picked up a lot of that style, sound, affectation, but you still have to have the range, I've talked about Crown Lands lots, and I had a Facebook memory come up recently, actually, of the night that Hearts played with Crown Lands at Canadian Music Week in Toronto. A fabulous freaking night. At the Bovine in Toronto, Queen West. Weird club, man. But we played on a Canadian Music Week bill with Crown Lands, who we did not know at the time. And as soon as we saw them play, we were like, oh, there's something going on with this band. And then you flash forward, whatever it's been, 6 years, something like that. Those dudes have officially blown up, and their new record is out, and they are critically acclaimed, playing really big tours, and Crown Lands are doing great, and good on them, man. They deserve it. They've worked very, very hard, and they have a unique sound and style, but it harkens back a bit to Rush for obvious reasons, and that voice harkens back to Rush as well, and you hear that as well in Josh Kiska from Greta Van Fleet. And, I mentioned that it sounds like a Triumph song, and some of the vocals sound a little bit Rick Emmett. He had that same kind of super duper high vocal range, and you hear it in this song too. So it's got kind of a late 70s, early 80s arena rock sound when the song actually kicks in. It's very lush, a lot of strings, keyboards happening, right? Again, it harkens back to that kind of epic 70s rock sound. And then, like in, I don't know, Styx or an REO Speedwagon, something like that. Then the song kicks in with the full band, and it's like really freaking good, man. I'm going to be obligated to listen to more Greta Van Fleet. It's just a band that I never really got around to because it felt like it was for the kids, in a weird way. But that's stupid and kind of reverse ageist on my part. I saw just this perpetual dismissal of the band as being a Led Zeppelin clone. And as you know, I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan, so I was not all that inclined to check out a band that was dismissed as a Led Zeppelin clone. But now they sound like Triumph, maybe it's worth it, you know what I mean? Anyways, crazy voice on that cat, and this is a really cool song and I like it. So if you haven't checked out Greta Van Fleet, if you're like me and they just kind of got lost in your shuffle, that's one to check out. I'm also going to point you at another new single by Winger. Oh yeah, kids. Winger. Winger's hanging around. They've released a couple new songs. They have a new record coming out. Again, remember I talked recently about how you go to a Steel Panther show or you go to any show by one of those bands from the era back in the 80s. You go see whoever's still around, Tesla, Def Leppard, Tom Kiefer, whatever. You go see one of those shows, Great White, Queensryche. There will be a cat in the front row, and he is wearing a denim vest. And on the back of that vest, there are just columns of patches. Patches of the logos of all the bands from back in the day. One of those patches will be Winger, okay? They were at that kind of level. They were patch on your jean jacket level. That's a specific level. I was not a huge Winger fan. You can't listen to them all, kids. There were a lot of bands back in the day like that, but Kip Winger is freaking great. And I'm delighted to report that his voice is as strong as ever. All right, they've released this new tune. It's called It All Comes Back Around. I don't know what it's about, but somebody done did something. And I really like it. It fits too, it's dark, epic, kind of a brooding song. Really, really nice melody, but a dark song and it's heavy. And Kip Winger sounds really, really great. I have to say that. Now I have met and spoken to Rod Morgenstein, the drummer. Rod Morgenstein is a freaking legend, and he plays, apart from Winger, in a side project with Ty Tabor of King's X and John Myung of Dream Theater called The Jelly Jam, all right? They have dropped, I think, 4 records, really fabulous stuff. Kind of a mix of all of those influences. Bit proggy, bit dark. It's more King's X than any of the others, but it's all part of it. And so a few years ago, didn't I have the chance to trundle down to the rock pile in T-Dot and see the Jelly Jam perform live? I did not ever expect to get to see the Jelly Jam live. It's one of these side projects where they release albums but don't really tour a lot. But it happened that the Jelly Jam went out and did some road dates and they wound up in Toronto and I went. And what a freaking night that was. Ty Tabor, my favorite musician on planet Earth, man. I stand front and center and watch that cat play guitar. Amazing stuff. After the show, set up the table, do the meet and greet, got to hang out and chat with Ty for a minute. And then Rod is right next door. So I got to shake hands and say hello to Rod Morgenstein. Great guy, legendary freaking rock and roll drummer. Just a great player, man. Left-handed player. I never got super duper into Winger, but I really, really like this song. It All Comes Back Around. So go check that out. Go check out your Greta Van Fleet and really scope out that tune by The National Man. I'm going to go. All of a sudden, we've reached the golden hour. I would like to know, Do you want solo episodes? Do you want conversations? What is most edifying for you? Where do you think the energy is in this program? Where do you think the potential is in this program? I mean, I have my own thoughts on it. I know what I like to do, but maybe that's not what's best. Maybe that's not what's best for you. So I'd like to know. I am soliciting feedback at any of those social media sites that I mentioned. You can message me that way. john-huff.com/contact. You want to go to my website where you can find blog posts and tour blogs and music that I've played on. You can find this podcast. You can also find a contact page. So you can message me, let me know. Just let me know what you think, man. I am open to your suggestions and curious about your thoughts. I'm going to go now. I want to thank you again for 4 years of supporting this program. It is greatly, genuinely, and sincerely appreciated. It is the evidence that good things happen when you put yourself out there. That evidence is in full effect in all of those conversations I've had with people out there who are doing extraordinary things. And if they can do it, you can do it, kids. All right? So until next week, please do take care of yourself. Listen to some really good music. And I'll check you later. Yeah. Don't you understand? Your mind is not your friend again.